The rubber that melted every summer. Natural rubber has an old problem. In the cold, it turns hard and brittle. In the heat, it turns soft and sticky. A rubber shoe that worked in April would be a sad puddle by July. Charles Goodyear spent years trying to fix this. He was not a chemist. He was a man with an idea and a great deal of stubbornness. He mixed rubber with almost anything he could find: magnesia, lime, nitric acid. He went into debt. He was jailed for those debts more than once and kept experimenting while he was in there. One winter, he was working with a mixture of rubber and sulfur. The usual story is that some of it landed on a hot stove. What he saw was not the mess he expected. The rubber did not melt into syrup. It charred at the very edge, and the part just inside had changed. It had become firm and springy, and it stayed that way as it cooled. Heat and sulfur together had done something that neither could do alone. It took him several more years to work out how much heat and for how long. The process is called vulcanization. It is the reason a car tire can sit in a desert without turning to glue and start the morning in frost without cracking. Goodyear himself never made money from it. He died in debt. The tire company that carries his name was founded almost 40 years after his death by people who simply admired him. Glass that holds together. Edouard Benedictus was a French chemist, and by most accounts a slightly disorganized one. He had a flask on a high shelf that he had used some time before and never properly cleaned. It had held a solution of cellulose nitrate, an early plastic. The liquid had long since evaporated, leaving a thin, clear film on the inside of the glass. One day, the flask fell. It should have shattered across the floor. Instead, it cracked, held its shape, and stayed in one piece. The web of cracks was there, but the pieces had nowhere to go. The invisible film inside was holding them. At that time, cars were new, and windscreens were ordinary glass. In a crash, the glass did not just break. It became a spray of blades. Benedictus had read about exactly that kind of injury, and the flask on his floor was suddenly a different object. He worked out how to put a plastic layer deliberately between two sheets of glass and press them together. That is laminated glass, and it is still made on that principle today. The car industry was slow to take it. It was expensive, and safety was not yet something people paid for. Laminated glass found its first real use in the eyepieces of gas masks in the First World War. The windscreens came later. Burrs on a dog. Georges de Mestral was a Swiss engineer. He went walking in the Alps with his dog and came home with burdock burrs stuck to his trousers and to the dog's coat. This is an ordinary annoyance. Everyone who has walked through long grass knows it. You pull them off and forget about them. De Mestral put one under a microscope. What he saw was not a sticky surface or a barb driven in. It was a field of tiny hooks. Each hook was curved at the end, and it had simply caught in the loops of the fabric and in the curls of the dog's fur. Nothing was glued. Nothing was pierced. Two textures had met, and one held the other. He decided he could make that on purpose. It took him roughly a decade. The hard part was not the idea. It was manufacturing. He needed a way to weave thousands of tiny loops and then cut them into hooks at exactly the right shape, in a material that would not wear out after 20 uses. He settled on nylon and found that nylon woven under infrared light held its hook shape. He called it Velcro, from the French words for velvet and hook. For years, it was seen as a novelty. It became ordinary partly through aerospace, where a fastener you can work with thick gloves on has obvious appeal.